Tuesday, November 17th, 2020, pre-agenda meeting for the Iredell County Board of Commissioners. And at this time, I'll turn things over to our county manager, Beth Jones, and ask if she'll review any adjustments to the agenda.
Thank you, Chairman Mallory. We have 3 adjustments. The first is the addition of item number 13 under Administrative Matters, and that will be a request to approve power of attorney for a border agent, and we'll explain that in more detail. The next is the addition of an item under New Business, and that will be a storm update by Kent Green, our Emergency Management Director. And the final item is just to add an announcement for, or actually to amend the announcement of vacancies occurring on boards and commissions to give notification that we will have 2 planning board vacancies that will be coming available in the next month.
Ron to call you.
What was that first one?
The first one is the addition of item number 13 under Administrative Matters.
Okay.
There should be a printout on the bench before the board that gives you the detail on that one.
Okay.
And then we have the new business item and just a modification of the announcements for vacancies and boards.
Yeah. Any other adjustments to the agenda, Commissioners? All right. We'll have a legion of presentations concerning the American Heart Association's Lifeline EMS Gold Plus Recognition Award. As you can all see them out here, according to our EMS Director, Blair Ritchie, normally they would submit the criteria for life-saving heart attack related calls, and the EMS, the county EMS, would be recognized at whatever appropriate level. This time they, because so many first responders from our rescue squads and our volunteer fire departments participate with us in those calls, that it really is a team event. They submitted all the team members as part of the award, and in a very unusual response, they've all been approved to receive, an overall team award, which I'm given to understand is a rarity. So we will have a conga snake of folks coming up and accepting the award and moving out. And I've put Blair in charge of moving all the people from point A to point B at the appointed time to be in the appointed place.
Conga line.
Yeah. Socially distanced conga line. Okay. So that's what that is about. We have an appointment before the board at 7 o'clock concerning a presentation of our audited financial statement through June 30, 2020. Are we going to get any kind of preview? Do we need to do anything at the pre-agenda, Deb?
No, sir, I'll just introduce Kathy when she gets here at 7.
Okay.
Thank you, Deb.
In between, we'll do a little light reading. Okay, then we have 3 public hearings. So we can get a little bit of a preview from Matthew Todd, right?
Absolutely.
And okay, the first one is actually the public transportation program, I think. Yeah. So is that going to be a tag team or?
No,
That's purely. Okay, well, okay, Brad, you just have a seat there then, Todd. Matthew, and you get to be on deck.
Tonight
pretty straightforward.
Yeah, you're just going to have to earn your pay
Yeah.
tonight, right?
Tonight, our public hearing is just for 3 public transportation grants, the 5307, 5311 admin, and then the combined capital, which will be a 5307 and 5311 combination. That's for the urban and the rural distinction between vehicles and stuff. Right now, the state does not know if they're going to be able to participate in the state funds for next year. Usually on capital items, it's at 80%.
Say participate. Participate in funds. What, does that mean that they're not going to give us the money?
Right now, they don't know. They
Okay, all right. So we're talking about them giving money or not giving money?
Correct.
All right, okay.
So on a capital item is usually 80% federal, 10% state, and 10% local. But the state with their, I guess their budget being up in the air, they aren't sure if they're able to donate that 10%. So on the request, we had to just cover ourselves and say that we were going to be able to participate both from the local share and the state share. But we did want to note that the state, we were expecting that from the state, because I figured if we didn't show that on our public hearing, then they would just say that, you obviously you don't need it, and not be willing to give it to us. But
That's the 72,929.
correct. And so our public hearing does reflect that we are willing to cover the local share and the state share if the state is unable to.
So if all we were to do was approve the local share and the state did not, would they automatically not do any of the grant, their 80%, or would they come back to us and say, well, the state isn't billing up to the bar, do you want to do it at this time?
I believe that the grant would just be thrown out completely, stating that if we weren't willing to cover the full our share and the state share, then the grant would just be terminated because it wouldn't be at 100% funding capacity.
Well, my guess is if the state gets it and knows that we're willing to do 20%, that they'll gladly let us do that. But
And I mean, it's passed through funds.
one would think that we would get some heads up that they would say, look, we don't have any money to do anything, and if y'all want something, you need to do an additional 10%. I mean, I just don't like going out on.
They might do that. I mean, it's only pass-through funds. So, I mean, the state doesn't actually have any money in it at all. It's all federal funds that are being passed through. So, I mean, they are collecting a 10% administration fee for administering the grants, on behalf of all the counties. But I'm not sure. I don't know how that would work with a call for projects. I know with other applications, if you don't have one of the items for the grant, it doesn't matter if, they don't come back to you and say, okay, well, can you get this affidavit to us? If you don't have it, it's thrown out.
But normally, this would normally go from the state to the feds, right? We don't send it directly to the feds, do we?
No, the money comes from the feds to the state and then to us.
Yeah, but the application,
The application goes to the state, and then the state does a collaboration of applicants on the behalf of all of the non-government apportionments to the feds.
Right.
yeah, but the state doesn't actually have money in it? This is a 10% handling fee they're saying they're donating essentially?
The state gets 10% of the total cost of the grant. They take as an administration fee from the feds, but then they usually contribute 10%. And so I guess it's kind of a wash, but I mean, it's.
It's not like government math.
Exactly. All I can say is, I can't wait until government's in charge of our health care. If this was confusing to you at all, just know there's half the country thinks that the people who thought this system up are going to be deciding whether or not you're going to get your kidneys operated on. Good luck. Good luck. Let me ask you real quick. the grant amounts of 1.1 million and 448,000, is that what you're requesting because that's what you need? Is that what you're requesting because according to a formula, you think that that's what you can get? Or is that what you're requesting because that's what they told you if you requested it, you could get it? Where did those numbers come from?
So the administrative matter, the 5311 administrative funds, the 258,000, that's that's straight off of our population. So that's an allocated amount that we are eligible for, and we ask for 100% of what we're eligible for. The 700,000 is, we are allocated 350,000 federal dollars from CATS, from the formula that the CRTPO has approved. And then for the capital and other items, that's just going off of our approved capital replacement plan on replacing vehicles when they get to the 150,000 mile mark, and then just to be able to keep a fleet of fresh vehicles.
Okay, and when you said this is the CATS formula,
Yes.
okay, so is this the old CATS formula, the current CATS formula, or is this the CATS formula that we'll learn about after they've changed this figure?
So those numbers there are off of the current formula.
And by the way, I'm not being a smart aleck, I'm giving him a chance to explain what he's going through, okay? Because you're not, Mr. Johnson is aiming at a target that's moving, okay? So I'm gonna give you, that's your opening to say whatever you want for the public record, okay?
So if I was going off of the formula of off the federal formula of what we earned because of the mileage that we traveled, the population density, and the passenger miles is off the federal formula, we would be eligible for $2 million of 5307 funds. But since we are not going off of the federal formula.
And this is for the $700,000 figure, right?
Correct.
Is that according to according to the formula that you have, that the feds put out, we should be getting 2.2 million for that, okay? But there's 700,000 there, and the reason that it's there is.
The 700,000 is because of the CATS formula that was adopted in 2014, has us with gaining 30 cents on the dollar of what we earn. And so, the 700,000 is, we would get 350,000 federal dollars, match it with 350,000 local dollars to provide $700,000 of service.
It'd be nice if we could just get that paid.
It would. I mean, if we were able to be a direct recipient, it potentially might have an advantage to us, but we would still have to have an agreement with the CRTPO to review that formula. Had a meeting with them on Friday of last week with CATS, and then CATS in the meeting, we recorded it, stated that they weren't actually using the formula that was approved in 2015, that there was one portion of the formula that they were not using, even though it was approved. And so once we brought that to their attention, they started kind of trying to backtrack, but we have it on recording, so we'll see where that takes us. I mean, they're not abiding by the formula that was approved by the CRTPO. I mean, they are changing it at will.
Interesting. And that's just going to get worse. Once again, Charlotte is determining our traffic patterns, and they're determining how many people, Iredell County citizens, can ride on the bus.
Got good news for you. In 15 years, they're going to decide whether or not you get a knee replacement or you walk around on crutches until you need a wheelchair. That's what's happening. That's what's happening.
I know.
And it's going to be a formula. It's not going to be somebody making a decision. There'll be some equation or some formula by somebody who we don't, the reason we're still dealing with it, we can't figure out who to go grab. We can't get anybody to admit that they made the formula or changed the formula.
Well, when the money passes through other hands before it gets to us, and those other hands decide they want to do something different, which you just heard our representative say, it was an approved formula, and they're just not going to go by it.
Yep.
Make sure you mention that at 7, when you go through that they're not abiding by the 2015 formula.
Well, and Union County's in the same position we
Yeah,
are
they are.
relative to
Yeah.
these funding streams.
Yeah.
Does there come a point if we can't get the 10 out of the state that you're going to have to cut services?
Not if we pay the 72,929.
I would agree with Mr. Halp. I mean, that would be ideal. I mean, I don't want to cut services. I mean, we already run a very, very lean operation. And one of the things that in the new formula that we're trying to get CATS to go with is that to give credit for a well-efficient ran operation. CATS is saying that their cost per hour is, 10 times what ours is, but they're ran for a for-profit operation who's, making money. We're not in the business to do that. We're in the business to, to get people where they need to go. So, I think you should be you should be rewarded for running an operation where your cost per hour is low.
So the end result for the taxpayer is where they used to fund 10% of the Iredell County transportation system, now they're funding 20 because of the state. And we won't even talk about the federal dollars in this particular conversation, but it's going to cost 10% more if we can't get those state dollars.
Well, and this is just a preview for regular roads in terms of competition down the road.
Oh, yeah.
In
Yeah.
order to get approval for local projects, local government is going to have to put more dollars on the table to have them score sufficiently high to pass muster.
If you're going to get asphalt, you're going to have to pay for a couple loads of it. Is what that equates to. Iredell County's going to have a couple loads coming into that project.
Okay.
See you at 7.
Any further questions for Brad?
Sorry you took the blunt of that, Brad.
No, he didn't, and I was our representative on CRTPO, and if I feel like I didn't do a good job as a commissioner anywhere, I would say that being effective at getting results in CRTPO has been something that I have not done well. But given the fact that Charlotte-Mecklenburg controls 48% of the vote, and they just need to get one little township anywhere to agree to them, they automatically win. So you can't, there is no muscling your way in, okay? And for most of the functions of Iredell County government, if you brought a whiteboard up here and said, we'll give you 5 minutes, and can you explain how that department works, or how it's funded, or how we're organized, I could give you a good story. With how roads are funded in the state of North Carolina, if you gave me a whiteboard, it could be a really big whiteboard, and when I sat down, you wouldn't know, you'd know less than when I stood up there, and it'd just be a mess. It is very complex. The good part of it is it used to be that and we're off of ICATS now, but it's kind of in the same. It used to be that there was some black magic in darkroom decision making about how the money actually got allocated. I always thought that the way that we, through the rural planning organizations that we used to have, a decade and a half ago, where the counties and the rural and the different planning organizations, they fed their priorities up. This NCDOT kind of made sure that we didn't have a 4-lane highway that stopped at a county line to a highway that didn't exist at all. So I always thought that how we prioritized roads made a lot of sense at our level, but then how they decided which roads to fund tended to be very, very, very political and not based on needs and rationale. And I would say that when Governor McCrory was elected, he said, we're going to fix that, and try to do stuff by formulas and scoring and try to be more logical and
Systematic.
and systematic and have a process and undue influences can't take place. And we've done that. But I'll be darned if I can explain it. On roads, it's tough. It's really tough. So, and ICATS is just part of that. So what he's having to deal with, I'm empathetic and sympathetic, but it's a tough one to fix.
Now, in fairness to Charlotte, I'll say this, you know, in the
Historically,
CRT,
they've been fair to us.
They know they can marshal a 51% majority at any given time, but they don't do that.
Nope.
Generally speaking. They'll work through an accommodation in a collegial way and try to get to a fair and equitable kind of result when you bring to them that something is really a burr under your saddle. And not being part of a small rural organization, it's sort of like, okay, well, a lot of dollars flow to Charlotte because it's predisposed to get those based on federal formulas, you know. So I've described it's like being that little fish that swims alongside the shark and all this chum's coming out, and we're getting fed better on the chum than a lot of rural RPOs are getting fed as the big fish in the pond. But ICATS is a little different deal. This is not something that really CRTPO gets involved in discussing an awful lot because it is so technical and so directed by federal, 53 this and that and the other section. And so it's been consigned to a relatively small, obscure committee to implement. And as a result, what goes on in that committee is just presented as here's what the formula has produced. And as we've heard, that formula that was approved by CRTPO has not been adhered to. And that's what we need to make some common cause with some of the other affected entities on CRTPO to bring that to everyone's attention and apply that appropriately and equitably so that we can get the fair share of dollars. And to our ICAT's credit, I mean, they're extremely efficient and flexible in their approach to trying to figure out ways to serve our population. So keep plugging away.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. Okay, Matthew. You're glad you didn't have to do that, aren't you?
Yeah. Mine are easier. We've got two rezonings tonight. They've not had any opposition through the planning board. They both got unanimous approval. I'll show the presentation up on the screen at the 7 o'clock meeting. The first one, Harold Mash, it's 26 acres almost. This is, years ago in the north end of the county, we had a lot of these non-owner rezoning petitions. You'd end up with thousands of acres, residents coming together. To put in a rezoning, typically to rezone from residential agriculture to one of the residential districts that, for example, don't allow single wides or double wides. This property was one of those. It was rezoned in 1996. Mr. Mash's property is on the edge of one of those districts. He wishes to put a single wide or double wide for one of his children or grandchildren on the property. So it's triggering the rezoning. Staff supports it. It's on the edge of one of those areas, and planning board unanimously supported it. The next one is up on 901 in Union Grove. Adjacent to some existing general business. There was no opposition for that one either, and staff supporting that one as well, and with unanimous approval from planning board.
Any questions for Mr. Todd?
Do you hear much conversation about non-owner petitions? I mean, in modern day time, because I know 20 years ago, it was one right after the other.
Yeah.
R20, R20.
Yeah, I think the last one is around 2005, and there's just not the interest in them. I think I think the areas where there was interest, they were taken care of, and moving forward, there's not an interest to do that anymore. Now, I'll have somebody come in tomorrow to ask to do one, probably.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah. I see the RUR just real close there. Now, that does permit single-wide mobile homes, doesn't it? Does RUR?
RUR allows a double wide, but not a single wide.
Double wide, but not a single wide, okay.
Okay, all right.
All right, thank you.
Next, we got our consent agenda, administrative matters appropriate for consent. Marvin on? I didn't ask
He
earlier.
should be, yes, sir.
Okay. Marvin, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Okay, great.
Yes.
All right. Beth, if you could tee those up for us?
Absolutely. The first item on administrative matters is a request from Iredell-Statesville Schools for approval to make application to the Local Government Commission to issue debt not to exceed $9 million. And let me give you a little bit of a background on this one. We left this on the agenda for informational purposes because they were not ready to make the formal request tonight. So the actual presentation from Iredell-Statesville Schools will be at our December 1st meeting. But because this is something that's a little different for us, we decided to go ahead and leave this on the agenda and walk through the board regarding the steps, how we got to this point, requirements for LGC. This is something that went to the Education Task Force members at our I think it was August the 11th. And there was some discussion and some recommendations back to the schools, but they're still wanting to move forward with making application to LGC. So Deb Cheek is here to kind of walk through this with the board and also give you a timeline and steps that would be required for LGC. Deb?
Good evening.
Good evening.
I also would like to describe a little bit about the process. I've had questions from Iredell-Statesville Schools, from different people that with the changeover there, different people in administration, a lot just don't understand the whole process of what it takes to take a debt issuance to the LGC. So I'm just going to run through what we've already done just by meeting with the schools, and we haven't even asked your permission yet to issue this debt, but just wanted to give you some insight onto what has already taken place. As Beth mentioned, on August 11th, met with the school task force, various school officials, and the consulting firm of ESG. And this presentation by the consulting firm included LGC application of September 8th and approval on October 6th. I explained to them in that meeting that this process could not move that quickly due to occurring during our annual audit. I have to make special requests before the audit begins to waiver from our contractual October 31st deadline, and also explain that there were public hearings, resolutions, et cetera, that have to be executed as well, which the consulting firm was not aware of. The task force at that time recommended that the school reprioritize their capital outlay and move this project to the top of their list. On September 3rd, the school system reached back out to explain that they would not be able to cover this project with capital outlay funds, and that this was actually a project for our fiscal year 2022 budget. Then the school system reached out to LGC to inquire about guaranteed energy saving contracts at our suggestion. That was brought up at the task force meeting. And it was determined by all parties that that was not a viable option. On September 15th, we were told that the rebates would be expiring. I reached out to the school system to confirm that rebates would be expiring in December. That was not the case, but I was told that rebates fluctuate. The schools will be able to apply for rebates as each school is completed, and the schools were confused over how this information was told to the board. I reached out then to our financial advisor for preliminary amortization schedules. On September 17th, I prepared a memo for management and the task force discussing the pros and cons of this project, with January 2021 being the earliest that we would be able to begin this financing project with our audit being presented tonight. So then on November 5th, I received an email from Melissa Wyke asking about the financing of the LED project. The consultant's report attached to her email indicated finance-making application on November 2nd, 3 days before I received the email, for approval on December 4th. Since approval must be obtained by the Board of Commissioners to even begin this process, I began working on a calendar so that we could present to you tonight. And the process would have been to request to proceed a formal presentation to the Board of Commissioners by the school system. I was told by the school system that they would not be able to be here tonight, that they were not prepared, and they asked for us to move that to December 1st. I reached out to our financial advisor for preliminary calendar for debt issue. If we had met tonight's deadline, approval from the LGC at the very earliest would be February of 2021. I also reached out to the bond attorney to ask about collateral for this project. They immediately started researching and sent a response last week. The problem with this is they are doing this project through all the schools. So what do you put up for collateral? Because you don't want to put up all your schools. So our bond attorney's working on that. Our local attorney is working on that. I also reached out to the financial division of the LGC to get confirmation that debt payments could be made from the restricted sales taxes, because that is what the school system is offering to do, is to make the debt payments back to us. And with our new funding agreement, we only give them restricted sales taxes for capital outlay, and that was confirmed. Also reached out to our local attorney. She must submit an opinion letter on the bid process, and I'm in the process of gathering all that paperwork and information that is required for her. We then had a telephone conference with local attorney and deputy county manager regarding title work that will have to be done for the collateral issue. Reached back out to the financial advisor to revise our calendar due to moving the request for permission to begin this process on December 1st. So now the very earliest that we can have the money in hand for the school system would be March. Be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Might I understand you correct that we were asked to begin this process in September, correct?
Yes.
So if they were prepared to ask for $9 million in September, how come they're not prepared to provide any information in November?
That's an excellent question. I was,
After you said that there's an amortization schedule, so if we borrow $9 million, what sort of life of the loan would it be, or the life of the bonds, and how much per year would we be expected to be paying out?
I don't believe I brought that amortization schedule with me. I know that our financial advisor did a 10-year term and a 15-year term. But I can get that to you this evening if you would like it. I didn't bring as much of the details on the project
Okay,
because
I mean,
the school,
interest rates are pretty close to zero, so if it's a 10-year bond and you're borrowing $9 million, it's gonna be $900,000 and change, right?
correct.
Okay. Do you know what our debt capacity is? We just passed a bond to build a high school and a middle school. After we issue that debt, do you know how much additional debt that we can issue without our bond rating becoming?
We are not in anywhere near our debt capacity.
Okay, so that's not an issue.
This will not affect that in any way. No, sir.
Okay. All right.
Has this particular entity ever signed the new funding formula contract?
It has not, and we have been asked to work on that. Local attorney is also working to amend that contract to say that debt payments will come from restricted sales taxes, because that was not in the original funding agreement.
I just think there's a lot of questions that need to be answered before moving forward and spending more staff time on this. Would you agree?
Yeah,
We haven't even heard the presentation yet.
Correct.
no, and, I mean, I thought part of our process was that the School Facilities Task Force prioritized 3 phases. We've approved it. I mean, we went to the wall, got a bond approved. There's a education task force that's in place, and I understand everybody's meeting by Zoom and all this stuff. And now all of a sudden, I'm being asked to spend $9 million for something that has bypassed every single project on the School Facilities Task Force list. And this needs to be number 1.
And I understand the payback portion of it, you know, obviously.
You do?
Well, I don't agree with it, but I understand. You replace the light fixtures with LEDs, you should see a savings in the power bill. I understand that part of it, but, you know, in business, you're looking at a 3 to 5 year payback, and got a little cold feet going the full Monty, 15 years. I mean, will those fixtures still be working in 15 years? I don't know. There's a lot of questions to ask. And I'm sure they've asked them and answered them, but we just don't know the answer to those questions yet.
You know, I don't think this was contemplated to be on the Facilities Task Force radar at all, because it has been an annual incremental replacement process of fixtures. And they have found a potential for being able to do that all at once and show that they can do so and pay for it with the savings. So this is an odd duck. It wouldn't be appropriate for the Facilities Task Force, in my view, because it's not a capital expenditure per se, it's a maintenance.
I'll take issue that this thing pays for itself. It does not pay for itself. The return on investment on this one, the return is 11.7 years. Go find me any company that's got at least 100 employees and a capital budget that on a cost reduction, if you propose a payback of 11.7 years, would approve it. They won't approve it with 10 years, they won't approve it with 8 years, they won't approve it with 6 years.
3 to 5.
Good chance they won't approve it until you're down below that 3-year limit. So I disagree, and to be honest with you, I mean, if you said that it pays for itself, what they identified was electrical savings of $570,000 a year. We just discussed how much we're going to be paying per year, over $900,000. So I'll argue with your point that this pays for itself.
No, I wasn't saying it paid for itself. I said that was what was presented,
That
it
yeah.
paid for itself. Now,
And I will counter that I want to see those numbers.
yeah, and I think that's a point well made. And that's what we need to focus on over the next couple weeks, staff to staff and all, is answering some specific questions. And I think Commissioner Robertson has come up with a number of questions that he will share, and then you all can run the answers to ground, because conceptually what's presented has to be borne out by the actual figures. And we just don't have a warm and fuzzy about that yet. It gives you a couple.
If I can ask one other question, has Mooresville Graded School District or Mitchell Community College approached us about doing similar projects?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
I bet both of those entities have some program to do a few a year, I'm sure, because that is a big push in pretty much every industry is.
My point is, if we say yes to this, pretty sure we'll have 2 more asks coming.
Right.
So this really isn't a $9 million question. This is going to be a 12, maybe $13 million question. How much money?
Yeah, but I just, on the Education Task Force, I just had a couple things. You know, what is ISS requesting? this is intended, they told us in our meeting that we had with them, they wanted the county to issue debt service for LED lighting, supposed to improve air quality, HVAC controls, and they would deduct the annual debt payment from their project from annual capital outlay appropriations. How is capital outlay appropriations figured? You said it was the Article 4042. Explain that a little bit, how that's funded, the capital outlay.
30% of one goes to the school systems, and then 60% of the other goes to the two school systems, and then it's split out based on their ADM. And that's the money now that they are given for capital outlay.
Okay. And we're supposed to, we were approached by Iredell-Statesville Schools originally to do a different way of funding for them. They asked us to move some capital money to current expense money, correct?
That's correct.
How much did we move from capital to current last year? Rough idea.
I can't remember the number.
Normally their capital was 11 something, and then it ended up, we appropriated 7.148 to them. What my concerns are, they ask us to amend our funding formula. You guys spent a lot of time on that. Then they didn't sign the agreement yet. What my concern is before we would move forward with any additional changes or any additional capital funding, their capital funding was reduced by their request already. So what my concern is, and I think in the meetings, we should talk to them about, they're using the additional current expense money now. If this board approved additional debt service for this, it frees up money on their current expense side, but they're talking about paying it out of the capital side. That concerns me because they've already requested us move capital money to current expense money. Then that debt service would come out of capital money and free up additional money. So I'd like to know what that would be used for. That would be a question we need to ask them. But what concerns me more than anything is we don't have an agreement signed by their board. And before we would consider that, I would request that our board meet and request that they sign a funding agreement that they requested, because Mitchell and Mooresville have signed it. And if they would sign that, my question is, should we amend our original funding formula to include this request? Because what concerns me down the road is if you free up money on their current expense side by doing this project, if it were approved, not saying that it pays for itself. What concerns me is it seems on face value that it's a no-brainer if it would pay itself back. So that concerns me. I want to see more evidence to that. But as sitting here, that this board is responsible for capital projects for the schools. If you take less money out of their capital funding that was already reduced by their request, I'll say that again, then if there's a leaking roof or they have a major situation again and they don't have the funds, they're going to be standing where you are asking us to pay for a leaky roof or an air conditioning unit that by PR is, if we don't want to allocate additional funding than what's already appropriated by Articles 40 and 42, per the agreement that we need to make sure they sign, PR-wise, it looks like we're not paying for necessities, but we didn't move money out of that capital to current. They did. We did it. We approved it per their request. That's what concerns me for this board and the next board is sitting on Education Task Force. What concerns me is we don't have enough answers of where the current expense additional money is going. We don't have enough answers as to will this project really pay for itself, to your point. I think when they come in December, all these questions need to be answered, but I've got some concerns about that. But, I definitely don't think we should move forward with anything without their board approving a funding formula that they requested, because they still haven't done that. A funding agreement. So those are some of my concerns.
Are you asking for that funding agreement to be signed before the December 1st meeting?
No, I'm just saying before I would support this at all if this board or the future board, whenever, because I'm assuming it's going to come before December 1st will still be this board. So we can ask all these relevant questions then. So they just need to be prepared to answer Commissioner Robertson's and the rest of the board's questions, because those are my concerns as you keep reducing capital. Dr. Miller is already saying he doesn't have enough capital to do what he needs to do. That's why we had a deferred maintenance list on our last bond situation. So that concerns me because that's going to fall back in our lap when they're short on capital, because they keep asking us to move capital to current to give them additional money for their spending over their selective spending, whatever that may be. And if capital's short, that's our domain, and it's going to look like we're not funding them because it's already been said publicly in their meetings that we reduced their capital funding, and we didn't. They asked it to be moved from capital to current, but the general public doesn't know that. So to be fair and forthcoming, when they come December 1st, all of that needs to be spelled out with the answers to all these questions. Because if it doesn't pay for itself, or it puts them in more of a dire strait capital-wise, I think it's a bad deal. That's my concern.
Okay.
Ms. Cheek is here because she's just informing us on the finance department, what they're doing relative to this project. And I understand that you have nothing to do at all with the allocation, the justification, the rationale, any of that. You're just, if you borrow $9 million, this is when you got to pay it back, and here's the process that you have to go through to borrow the $9 million.
And heads up, the local government commission's got.
So I understand that. What I'm having a little bit of trouble doing is, how far do we allow people to come to our finance department and say, hey, I want to borrow $15 million, hop to it, baby. And then 4 months later, it's like, oh, here we are, y'all need to approve $15 million. I don't think so.
They should have the minutes of the meeting where we approve the project in their hand when they come to our finance.
It's okay to consult and just say, hey, if we borrowed X, what would our debt service be and all that kind of stuff. I understand that part, but it just seems like we're way in front of our skis here.
Well, this was proposed as a project that didn't fit neatly into any category, because initially it was proposed as a lease purchase of fixtures, all right? And that continues to be, I believe, what is the desired structure. And so that's something that we've never done before. I don't even know if the local government commission, so we have to reach out to local government to find out from their staff, how does this need to be presented and shaped, and do you have issues? Because if they have issues, we need to know ahead of time so that we don't, spend a lot of time doing something that's going to get turned down.
Right.
So, at the end of the day, what Commissioner Robertson's questions relate to, as much as anything, is the financial feasibility from a business perspective of the cost savings and all. The other issues are, well, you're dealing with one pot of money that's capital, another pot of money that's operations, and there are some legal barriers between the two. You cannot use capital to just move that over into your operational budget. You can take operational dollars and move them the other way into capital. So it's a little confusing about, which pot of money is being the bill payer and which one is being the beneficiary, and whether or not legally, though the result of that is something that is allowable. We just need to determine whether that's in fact the case or not. And the other different issue is this is being done as a design build as opposed to a normal bidding process. And that is an option that you have but it's an unusual option to use for replacing fixtures, I should think. So there's just a lot of questions that the reason we did not just say, okay, well, we'll see you December 1st, was we wanted to make sure the entire board was aware of the complexity of this request and the questions that it raises, both from the permissible legal perspective as well as the LGC approval perspective, and then ultimately the business perspective about whether or not this passes the sniff test as far as a wise deal, assuming it's legal and approvable.
Right.
Okay. So, any other questions or comments?
Just a couple. Deb, what was the LED electrical savings? What was their projection on what that would save annually?
$500,000.
Yeah.
570 or something? Okay, and then the entire project saves 333 a year. Did they say what the additional 163,000 would go towards annually? Did they say that in your conversations?
The school system say what it would go toward?
Yeah.
It was my understanding that all the savings from this project would go toward their current expense.
But they didn't say what they were going to use it for.
No, I do not remember them indicating what it would be spent for, but it would not go back to capital, it would go back to current expense.
The proposed rebate, if fully given, was around 353,000. Do you know what that was based on?
I do not. And we did try to do a little bit of research on that, but it's pretty complicated with all the different power companies, just in trying to figure out when they expired. But their consulting, that was their consulting group that prepared all of that information.
But the consulting group that prepared it is the same group, is it not? Or what's the difference? Is a company wanting to make an $11 million purchase? Is that, who's doing the consulting firm? Who's giving all of these estimates and figures?
The firm that will do the project.
So it's not really an independent
They will choose.
number cruncher.
They have come up with a guaranteed maximum price, and then they will bid that out. They still have not chosen the contractor, from what I understand. I've tried to learn quite a bit about design build, because the LGC is quite confused on this as well. But I have been reassured in multiple writing emails by Dr. Miller that the price will not exceed $8.8 million, even though the final contractor has not been chosen.
Do you think you need to send something with all the questions we need, so they'll be ready on December 1st?
Yes, we'll just do that staff to staff.
Yes.
Right, okay.
Okay, anything further? Anything from our legal people? Okay.
It depends. I already know what she was going to say. It depends.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Ms. Cheek.
Wearing a mask so we couldn't read her lips.
But the darts coming of her eyes are not.
Yes, the look tells you everything you need to know.
Okay.
Okay, on to the next item. The next item is a request from Charlotte Water for approval to extend water to the Davidson Point neighborhood and to acquire property in Iredell County. And we have representatives on the telephone that is here to answer any questions and make the presentation on their behalf. And I know that Ms. Valdez has been speaking to the attorneys as well, so I'm gonna let them kind of tag team.
That interlocal agreement does not infer or imply or obligate us for any financial expenditures from Iredell County, correct?
It does not, and let me go back and give you a little bit of a history on this one. The town of Davidson and Mooresville came up with an agreement regarding an annexation agreement that Davidson would annex or could annex to a point and Mooresville to a point. And so they came up with that agreement.
To a point in Iredell County.
Yes, in Iredell County. The town of Davidson receives utility services from Charlotte Water. And they're looking to extend services to an unserved area in Iredell County compliant with that agreement. And I'm looking to Ms. Valdez to verify what I'm saying is correct and to add to that.
I mean, I'm familiar, I'm just stating it for purpose.
Right.
This isn't gonna cost us any money. Consent.
Yeah, just briefly, Mr. Powers is on the phone, the attorney for Charlotte. If you have any questions, and he also has support staff from Charlotte Water, if there are any technical questions, but really, it's a formality that they're
Correct.
before you because of statutory requirements. When one local government extends into another county, that they have to have approval from that Board of Commissioners before they can acquire property.
Any further questions, comments? I don't know where Gene went.
I don't know, but the Mooresville-Davidson agreement for annexation seems to be reasonable. Because who can reach that area and provide service to that area? It seems to be
I
reasonable.
may add to, Mooresville commented, said that they had no objection to this request at all.
Consent, Mr. Chairman.
Consent?
Consent, all right. Marvin? Marvin, consent? Okay.
All right.
Consent.
Okay, thank you. The hanging chad. Okay.
Thank you. The next item is a request from the Health Department for approval to write off uncollected patient account debt in the amount of $39,958.71, and Ms. Henson is here to make this request.
Evening.
Good evening.
I'm here tonight to ask you to approve our bad debt write-off for 2020 for private pay accounts. These are accounts that have had no activity since June the 30th of 2017. They are sent a 30-day letter, a 60-day letter, a 90-day letter, then a letter from the county attorney. We do participate in the North Carolina Debt Set-Off Program. If we have a Social Security number and a minimum of $50, we will participate in that program related to that account. Last year, we didn't include our dental clinic bad debts. We had switched electronic medical records, and it was difficult to discern what was uncollected debt and prior to June 30th of 2016. So that's why you see the inflated rate this year. Typically, dental is anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000 in write-offs. And
That'll be corrected for next year,
yes,
yes.
absolutely.
Okay.
And that represents about 2.67% of our gross charges. And one thing I do want to call your attention to is that you see no write-offs in Medicaid. And what that means is our staff work diligently to collect every single penny that we bill Medicaid for. Any questions?
Well, I've been on the board as long as anybody here. Without Marvin, I can tell you, this figure is blood from a rock. You know,
Yeah, you're not gonna collect
we can
that.
beat on Jane all day long. She can't make that number go
I tell
down.
you,
at this
staff has beat on those accounts.
Yeah.
They've left no stone unturned trying to collect that.
On the front end, I assume we collect Social Security numbers?
We try.
But we can't deny service if
Right,
they don't have it.
that's right.
the problem.
We'd be violating our, some of our federal agreements, the funding that comes through, so we definitely can't deny services.
I don't know if it's still true, but it used to be if they got convicted of Medicaid fraud, Medicaid wouldn't pay for the stuff, but if they show up at the health department, we still have to give the services. These people are gonna be running your health care, folks. I'm gonna just keep saying it. Every time there's something stupid, they're gonna decide whether or not you get that kidney transplant.
Jane, thank you and staff for all you do generally, but I know you guys have been in overtime for a long time for COVID, but thank you. A lot of people don't understand what you do is trying to make their lives better and safer, and sometimes the hassles and headaches are problematic, but you're doing your job, so thank you for what you're doing.
Welcome.
You know, you look at the write-offs that hospitals and medical offices have, they're, granted, some of those charges are inflated in order to get a decent payout from insurance or whatever, but they are an order of magnitude greater than this, you know, just way out of the ballpark. So thank you for y'all's attention to the bottom line, while at the same time providing the services.
Welcome. I'll pass that along.
Consent?
Consent.
Thank you.
Consent.
Thank you.
Deal.
The next item is a request from Parks and Recreation for approval of budget amendment number 23 and to accept $58,500 in reimbursement grant funding from the North Carolina Alliance for YMCA's. There she is. And Jen Winters is here to make this request.
Good evening, Chairman Mallory and other boards of the commission. I appreciate you having me here this evening. I wanted to share a little bit more information in regards to our request. So we are requesting reimbursement and approval of the budget amendment number 23 to accept $58,500 estimated in reimbursement grant funding from North Carolina Alliance for YMCA. This is federal funds for community-based organizations that have provided remote learning support for students during the coronavirus pandemic. This funding will reimburse the county for salary and supply expenses incurred during the operation of the Iredell Kids Camp program, which had started with 2 locations and is currently at 1 location and planning to operate through the rest of the calendar year with the school system. Providing this Iredell Kids Camp program as a remote learning site for students has allowed parents to continue employment while providing a safe and productive environment for their child. And this grant would allow the county to continue this program with minimal financial burden.
Now, these funds are authorized by the CARES Act, is that right?
Correct. This is a subdivision of that.
It's interesting that they're being funneled through the North Carolina Alliance for the YMCA to then a government entity. But when I first saw that, I thought, what, the YMCA is actually giving us some money? This is really odd.
Man, when you vote to give away $3 trillion, you got to pour it in every funnel there is.
So, okay. But it's actually not the North Carolina Alliance for YMCA's that's making these decisions, is it?
They're the ones that are managing the process. So our application went to that alliance, and all the reimbursement requests go to them as well.
So
They've been charged from the state to
So they're the
manage that
executive agent, and they're making the
a
call.
little bit on.
Okay. Any other questions?
Nope. Consent.
Consent?
Did a good job the other night on the Rec Advisory Board. I attended for Commissioner Norman.
Thank you. Sorry
Michelle
about
was
the,
unable to be there. Jen did a great job running the advisory meeting.
Thank you. Sorry about the technical difficulties with our
We understand.
WebEx. Thank you.
Cats, man, I'm telling you, all right.
It's always
Thank you very much, Jen.
Okay, Mr. Kent Green has the next 3 items on the agenda, and I'll give you a brief introduction of those and then hand it to him. The next 3 items are requests from the Fire Tax Oversight Committee, and what we're going to do tonight is present this to the board as kind of a first briefing on these 3 items, and they basically center around Central Volunteer Fire Department, West Iredell Volunteer Fire Department, and Monticello Volunteer Fire Department, which deals with either paying off existing land purchases or making future land purchases for future fire station sites. So because this has several different future impacts regarding fire station funding, different analysis of the appropriate locations, things of that nature. We wanted to go ahead and present this to the board tonight and begin that conversation in consideration, but certainly do not expect a decision tonight from the board. Mr. Green?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As Ms. Jones said, this is from the Fire Tax Oversight Committee. Let me preface this by saying the Fire Tax Oversight Committee is appointed by this board. to hear requests from the fire departments for whether it be equipment or facilities. Our most recent meetings have been trying to determine if, how, and when to spend any funds that are left over in the old countywide service district. We did spend some funds a month or so ago for a Cool Springs roof repair at their Station 2. At our November 11th meeting, Central Fire Department presented a proposal to purchase 10 acres of land adjacent to their existing primary station on Wilkesboro Highway for a price of $200,000. At the same meeting, West Iredell proposed purchasing about 8 acres of land at Island Ford and Lippard Farm Road for a replacement of their primary station. During that discussion, it was determined that Monticello had purchased land a couple of years ago for a potential future station replacement beside their current station. Motion was made in that meeting to pay off that debt after it was approved, or a motion was made and approved to fund both Central and West Iredell's projects.
Will you go back over those three again, those requests?
Central Volunteer Fire Department, Central School Fire Department has proposed to purchase 10 acres of land adjacent to their current station for $200,000. West Iredell Fire Department has proposed to purchase 8 acres of land at the corner of Island Ford and Lippard Farm Road for $200,000. And then Monticello has already bought land a couple of years ago beside their current station in hopes of replacing their station at some point in the future. Their balance on their note for that is $109,692.
And these are the only 3 fire departments that haven't had major renovations in the past 10, 15 years.
That's correct.
They're still living in a 60-year-old building.
That's correct. The newest of these is Monticello. It was built in 1979, but it's a metal shell structure, barely enough room to put the trucks in with very little administrative space. As the county continues to grow, the service demand continues to increase, the need for putting people in the stations, whether they be employees of the nonprofits or at some point in the future employees of Iredell County, we have to have a place to put them. And currently, these 3 stations do not have places to put overnight staff or staff for any extended period of time.
And Monticello concurred that they don't really need a fire department on the scale that some of these other fire departments have been built. They don't need a multi-agency building.
No, Monticello Fire Department is just about 2 miles, I think, from the Public Safety Center, so they wouldn't need an EMS space. The Sheriff's Office has their training facility right beside the fire department, so they don't need a Sheriff's Office. So a station at Monticello would not be to the scale of Cool Springs or Trinity, much smaller.
So in y'all's meetings, was there discussions as to, is it cheaper to renovate some of what's there to add maybe some quarters to sleep or house? Has there been a study done that would tell you what a new station compared to renovations or add-ons at those, or are they not feasible for that?
I think it's too early in the game. Typically, you go out and try to acquire property first, and then you form a committee to study the thing. And
I don't think I didn't ever go buy a lot and then try to figure out if I'm gonna build a house or not. That's kind of one and the same.
Well, the problem with...
When are we scheduled, do we have a plan or a schedule to build these folks brand-new fire stations?
The way the facilities come on to debt service is one has to come off. So the next one does not come off until I believe it's 2024. So it would be after that point, the next station would be built, and then about 25
And we've got the money to
26.
pay for that?
We will in the debt service as those others roll off.
In 2024?
Yes, sir.
new all-county 9, now the funds that we were talking about here are coming out of the old fire district.
These funds would. The debt service is coming out of the 9 cents for the new all-county fire service district.
Well, there needs to be a lot of due diligence on this, just to make sure that we are, in fact, investing where the future departments need to be, based on growth projections and all that. And we're going through that process as we come up with the transportation plan and update the 2040 Horizon Plan. We'll be getting a lot of data to be able to understand what those growth patterns are likely to look like, because I know there's been discussion in the past that there's been some locations that were not optimal. And the other thing I think we need to take a look at is, we have a number of satellite stations out there that were placed there effectively to get a lower a lower insurance rate and I'm not so sure that now that even has much weight in the insurance rating, and they are actually not functional departments. I don't know what they're used for particularly, but we need to take a look and say, is there some property that needs to be sold to get it off the books and then invested in these, new department locations to defray the cost?
And that has been the practice. When a new station was built, the old station property was sold to either offset costs of the building or pay off the land that was purchased by the department ahead of time, or to pay for additional fixtures and equipment inside the facility.
With those people being their own entities like that, have they, when they sell the old departments, have they been required or requested, I don't know what authority we have technically, since they're their own 501c3s, right?
We don't have any control over that 501.
It's kind of like the schools, from my perspective is I'd like to see them get rid of properties they're not going to need and pay down some debt service or use that for needs. So what prevents the fire department if they, let's say you built hypothetically a new station for one of these you just mentioned, and they sell the old department? It makes sense to us and to the taxpayer to take that money and pay down that debt service. But what if they didn't do that? What if they took it to use it for personnel?
Well, a lot of departments it's a mixture of what they've done. They use part of the money from sell the old station. They bought equipment with it. It's a mixture there.
Can that be, in our agreements and contracts that we do with the fire departments, is that addressed, or can that in the next round of contracts, can that be something that is, just like the schools, capital stays capital?
Right.
Okay, I'm not on that committee yet, so.
I think that would be appropriate in the facility agreement like we have with Cool Springs.
Right.
At the end of the term of the note, the building reverts to county property.
Right.
And the same thing with Trinity.
Correct.
The only problem with that is we're almost to the end of everybody's upgraded their buildings. There's only 2 or 3 left.
West Iredell did add on to the back of their station, put some training space and additional apparatus space on. Central put a separate metal building behind their station for some additional apparatus. But that's another thing that we're working on right now, and would be further into it if we didn't have hurricanes and floods and COVID. But developing a firm apparatus list and only replacing what is absolutely necessary for that department to function.
So can you in-house, I don't think we need to hire an outside firm, I hope, do a feasibility review of these requests, the needs, the cost? Is that?
I don't have the expertise to, but I think.
That's what I'm saying as far as, I think that would be very important to our point from my perspective is, when they talked about these funds, who negotiated, the property out there is $20,000 an acre, okay? Who negotiated that? Is that the highest and best use? Have we gotten the best price possible? It's taxpayers' dollars that's being spent. I know y'all have done a good job.
That is 55. The amount that you're recommending, or your group, has come and said, we're supposed to pay 55% over tax value. Now, I'm going to tell you, I want, Dean, does anybody in this county get to get to come and tell us, give me a check for $200,000. And something is that far over what tax value is what we say it's worth. That's what we say it's worth. So when you come and tell me that for $128,000 worth of property, I'm supposed to write a check for $200,000, I'm gonna tell you, you're gonna get a hell of a lot of questions. Right off the bat, that's where it's gonna start. So before people come and hand me a list and say, because you just handed me a list of $500,000 of other people's money. And I understand they're volunteer fire departments. This has nothing to do with the value of some guy that gets paged at 2 a.m, goes out, fights fire, pulls somebody out of a vehicle. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about if we're looking to provide facilities for this county 10, 15, 20 years from now, they need to be in the right place, in the right composition, and we don't spend $200,000 in this manner. We don't do it. Nobody else gets to do it. Nobody else in this county. I see lots of managers here. Beth, can you go just say spend $200,000 on something? The county manager can't do it. That's the way when you go to these committees, this is the way you got to present it. Whether it's the school committee or the fire committee, this is other people's money and we're running out.
And I think.
We're running out.
And you're right. I think.
It's time, we are not in a place, I'm gonna preach for a second. Being a county commissioner isn't about choosing between crappy projects and good projects. That ship sailed a long time ago. We make the decision between have to have projects that get the money, some of them, not all of them, and good projects. Good projects don't, just because something's a good idea, I can almost guarantee you it's not going to get funding. It's just not. In order to say yes to a few big things that we need, we have to say no to a lot of things that we need. Every month, year after year, we built that jail saying no to a bunch of stuff that it would have been easier to say yes to. I'm not saying that we don't need to build fire stations. Please, nobody put words in my mouth. I'm just saying, don't show up and tell me I need to pay 55% over what we say land is worth because somebody told me I should. It's gonna take more than that. If you're gonna ask for $500,000, treat me like you would Uncle Fred. Because I guarantee you, if any of us had an uncle and we said, hey, Lisa, will you lend me $500,000? I promise she's got some questions. I'll let you take it out of my allowance. I don't think she'll care.
What my point was is kind of like the facilities task force. You know, the group Tommy and Kent are on are looking at who's on deck. You know, who didn't get, you know, what's coming, whether it be an apparatus. You know, the new agreement, we're looking at who's due to be an apparatus, who's due maybe for a station replacement. What I'm asking that group to do, I think, is vet the need of it and when they need it, how do we pay for it? How do we start preparing for it? And I know you roll off existing debt to be able to pay for a new project. So just like in the school thing, to be most efficient, you know, the facilities task force approved, which was made up of citizens as well, you know, approved the projects and prioritized them. And then our job with staff was to figure out how to pay for those requests from the schools. So y'all's job on your committee, I think, if I'm not mistaken, was to prioritize those needs and come here and figure out, just like we're doing now, is vet, how do we pay for it? What's the best price? Do we talk to the fire departments at that appropriate time before these and say, you know, have you negotiated? those acreage fees, because this is taxpayer dollars.
But this stuff needs to be done at committee level. This shouldn't be, the first filter for, do we have the money? Does this pass the test? Cannot be this board.
Mr. Green, did you have any influence on, or conversation on where the particular properties are located and if they're suitable for that?
I was not, that's been left to the nonprofit level. However, studies after studies that have been done throughout the years have identified that the current station locations are suitable for the response areas. With Central's proposal, it's moving across the street. For West Iredell's proposal, it would be moving down about a half a mile. So it wouldn't impact service deliveries.
We went through this 10 years ago when we were citing stations in Troutman and stuff, trying to get, because of the insurance rating and the distance and all that kind of stuff. And heck, I'll give it to Steve Johnson, who predicted this. He said, as soon as we meet all those criteria, the insurance commission, they'll change the rules.
And they did.
Yeah.
That was my point, is just asking you to review all of that information and get back to the board. And to Ken's point, this has nothing to do with the value of the services of fire departments.
It has
because
nothing to do with
This
that.
is about making sure we are spending taxpayer dollars efficiently, only when necessary and needed. And we want to be able to tell the taxpayers, and I'm sure the fire departments do as well, and their board directors, that, you know, they got it for the best possible price, and it was needed and necessary. And that's all I'm asking, is to look into all those things.
This is a little off topic, but you told us when you first came to Iredell County that your assessment that we were over apparatused. Can you tell us what your success rate has been as far as getting departments, nonprofits to reduce their fleet?
We're working through that. We've had some that have come to us wanting to reduce their fleet. Others, we are having to encourage them to do so.
Do you see that as far as they're just getting rid of a truck, or are they, trying to combine two trucks in one, or yeah?
Both situations. Harmony just bought a truck, so now they're trying to sell two older trucks. South Iredell's getting ready to replace two trucks with one. So the truck's a little more expensive, but it's cheaper than replacing two.
And they're on the schedule for
They
this?
are on the schedule, yes, sir.
What is we went through the period when in order to get the insurance right, we needed more tankers.
I know.
And so.
And ladders.
Well.
That was all what.
Whack-a-mole, man.
Yeah.
You know?
Hopefully, the number of ladders is being reduced actively. We're down from 8 to, I believe, 5.
What is the, in your experiences, what is the, you know, we talked about when we did the contracts and talking to some of the fire departments and stuff, the shared apparatus feasibility. You know, instead of every department having every single piece of equipment, you know, they have mutual aid. And I know that may require a minor amount of response time difference, but instead of duplicating every apparatus for every department, how much are they looking at, or are you looking at now in your apparatus replacement feasibility? How much have y'all looked at on that committee about sharing apparatuses in some areas?
Unfortunately, the non-specialized apparatus are really driven by ISO. So they have to have a certain number of engines, they have to have a certain amount of water in tankers. Some departments, depending on the area they serve, need a ladder. Very few departments need a ladder truck. They don't look at brush apparatus, they don't look at squads, they don't look at rescues. So we're doing a pretty good job of making sure that those are not being replaced just half-heartedly. A department doesn't need, in most cases, 2 brush trucks, one at each station. They can do with one. We just don't have a lot of brush fires anymore.
In some of our conversations, the chairman and I were in a meeting with you recently and the manager, and part of the biggest problem we have is personnel and manpower. And, you know, we've discussed in the past about having some duty crews. What our concern is trying to get the departments, just like we're trying to get a lot of them to use similar equipment so they can interchange on a fire that they're helping together. And if the apparatuses that are being replaced are similar, then the firemen from one department to Department A to B know how to use that apparatus and make it function without cross-training. That's something I'd like for you to continue pushing. I know you are, but when you get manpower from Department A assisting Department B on a working house fire, for instance, they need to know how to work that equipment if they're different manufacturers. Is that not something we're still continuing to look at as well?
It is, and it's actively occurring through the replacement of hose that are similar across departments, nozzles, turnout gear, air packs. They're each beginning more so every day to follow the lead of someone else who's already made the purchase. So it's.
I know
it's
in my
getting there
background,
slowly.
law enforcement, that's why the importance of everybody carrying the same duty weapon. If I run out of a magazine, Tommy can pitch me his and it fits my gun.
Mr. Chairman, can I make the motion that we take this, everything that Mr. Green is presenting tonight under advisement and instruct Mr. Green to do a
Review.
feasibility study of these departments that haven't built a new building yet and see what we can do on that. Is this actually the direction we want to go for the next 10 years in the fire service? Can we do that?
Well, a motion would actually need to be done at the 7 o'clock hour, I suppose.
I can just report out
Yeah.
consensus of the board.
Yeah.
We go back to staff.
Okay.
Is that pleasing to the board?
Yeah, that's fine. Just for the record, Newt Gingrich said, "I'm a hawk, but I'm a cheap hawk." Hey, I'm a slightly overweight 60-year-old male. Believe me, I want the emergency services to be able to get there fast. If you need one truck and my house is on fire, I hope you have two. I hope they have five. I call 911, say, you got chest pain? Man, I hope that ambulance is parked at the end of my driveway. I want it so close. I understand that. I want to give them all the apparatus they need, everything that they've got to do their job right. We're just trying to make the dollars go as far as we can. That's all we're talking about. Okay. Next item.
Okay, item 8.9. Thank you, Kent.
8.8, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, excuse me, 8.8.
Yeah.
The next item is a request from Social Services for approval of the Department of Health and Human Services Iredell County Memorandum of Understanding pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 108A-74, and Ms. Smith is here. Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Ruffey is here to make this presentation. Yeah.
Holding the big guns in reserve.
Mr. Mallory had asked that I put together a small PowerPoint presentation. I know y'all are crunched for time, so I'll fly through it as quickly as I can. If I can figure out how I get that up. The drawer? Okay, good deal. All right, there we go. This is not my first time here to do this, and this is something that has to occur typically. All right, why is it not going big? IT. Okay, we'll try to make it.
Slideshow at the top.
Oh, was I clicking the wrong one? Okay, I'm technologically challenged at times. Okay, so this is the Memorandum of Understanding for January 2021 through June of 2022. And I'm going to highlight a little bit of background and some changes for this Memorandum of Understanding from the last one that you signed last year. It is mandated by Session Law 2017-41 that we enter into this Memorandum of Understanding. The Department of Health and Human Services in March of 2020, based on COVID-19, did decide not to issue any corrective actions or mandates for the current Memorandum of Understanding that we are operating under. It ended in June of 2020, so they decided to start this one with January of 2021 and running through June of 2022. There is a law, Ryland's Law, that is a dashboard that is in the process of being developed. They hope to have pilots operating on that by the end of this calendar year, that the public can go out and access all the counties within the state and where we're performing in the Memorandum of Understanding. For the Memorandum of Understanding for fiscal year 2020, there were 13 mandated performance areas. This one that we will be entering into has 16 mandated performance areas. So what they did is they added 4 areas in adult services, they added 1 foster care area, and they added 2 areas that are in, deleted 2 areas. I'm going too fast. The adult protective service areas, they pulled from the performance measures over into mandated performance areas. It's dealing with the investigations involving allegations of abuse and neglect and also exploitation and our timeliness in getting those investigated. The other 2 areas under adult protective services were special assistance. Those are our special assistance applications for the aged and for the disabled, and that we process those timely. The state did not set benchmarks for the counties in these 4 areas that they have moved into mandated areas. They are going to work with the counties on developing that based on our prior year's performance. They do have standard measures in each of those areas. And with the adult protective services for abuse and neglect and exploitation investigations, those will be 85% for standard measures. And then for special assistance applications and SAD, those are 85% for processing. They added the foster care measure that 95% of all foster care youth have a face-to-face visit with their social worker monthly. They deleted the requirement that we had to process 90% of all program integrity claims within 180 days of discovery. That is being handled under the USDA management evaluation that occurs annually. And they deleted the child support total collection goal. And I've got some graphs here of how we performed in fiscal year 2020 Memorandum of Understanding. This is the energy program. We have to process 95% of those applications timely in both the category of households who do not have a heating or cooling source, as well as households who have a heating or cooling source. So as you can see, we're meeting the expectation. Typically, most months, the blue line is for Iredell's performance, the red line is how the state is performing, and the black line is our target performance level. This is, since July of 2020, the data I have available for that same performance area, although we're not under a memorandum of understanding for July through December. We are still tracking that so we can watch our trends. I was concerned when I saw how we performed in July, August, and September, but there has been data reliability issues in the energy program with the report that's available. They are working to program NC-FAST to correct that problem. So we should trend back to 100% once they correct that, and the state's percentage is suffering as well because of that problem. Okay, this is the households that have heat and cool that we process timely. We are performing at 100% in those levels, and then we've been 98 to 99% so far this fiscal year in that. The Workforce Family Assistance Program, processing of applications and reviews, we have to do those timely 95% of the time for applications as well as reviews. I'm proud to report that Iredell County is 100% every single month like clockwork in performing their job duties in this category. That is reflected. The state runs between 98 to 100% as well. So that program area does a great job. And that's the recertification showing at 100% for Iredell. There was a period of time with data reliability in food and nutrition and work first, so you'll see some time periods that say no data, and that's because the state was having problems with their dashboard and obtaining accurate data. Food and nutrition has been an area up until October of last year in 2019 that we struggled to meet the mandated requirements in. We do have to process our emergency food stamp applications within 4 days, 95% of the time timely. We have to process our normal timely 95% of the time, and we have to process our recertifications 95% timely. So we have been meeting those thresholds since October of last year in all categories for both sets of applications. And that has been a big hurdle we've had to overcome due to some staffing issues. But I'm very proud of that staff, and they've done well there. Again, that's showing where we're passing right now. So we've been running between 96.53 and 98.91. This is the reviews or recertifications. Again, we struggled July, August, and September. We dipped a little bit in January and February. You're going to see not applicable for March through June, and that is because of COVID-19. The federal government did an automatic extension of all the certification periods because of the increase in applications that we were seeing, so we did not have to process reviews, so that's why you're seeing not applicable. We did have to resume processing reviews in July of 2020, so we were 100% in July, August, and September. We were 96.19 in October. So we are still trending to pass these areas. The face-to-face foster care visits each month, that unit has done a phenomenal job in making those face-to-face visits occur. June of 2020 was the only month in the last fiscal year that they did not meet that 95%. Our program administrator monitors this very closely and has had to contact the state to argue that their data was incorrect in some months. So we have got to the point we're satisfied with that data, and it seems to be matching up with what we're showing locally, but we don't hesitate to contact the state if we find a problem. This is APS. For 30 days, completion of investigations involving abuse and neglect. They're usually 100% each and every month. This was just a performance measure last year. This is a new one that's been mandated this year, and so far they're 100% since July in that goal. This is the exploitation data for their investigations, 100% each and every month there. And they're at 100%, although they have to only be at 85%. The special assistance applications were typically at 100% every month in that area. We do not get the state data, so I do not know how Iredell compares to the state, but we're proud that we're 100%. So I imagine we're probably usually ahead of what state performance is. Again, since July, we've been 100% in that category. This is the disabled special assistance. We are 100% in all of those areas. Child support enforcement, they lowered the expectation for what has to be met by counties to 50% in percentage of paternity established and 50% of cases under order. Those are the minimum federal levels required to draw down any incentive fundings as a state. We will have no problem meeting those goals. I feel that the changes that have been made in the performance measures are a positive and beneficial for our county. They have lowered the expectations that counties have to meet, and they are taking into account public health emergencies now, as well as some other things that are out of our control and whether we're held harmless or not. So this is percent of cases under order. They finished the year at 88.15%. They are at 88.23 right now. That does fluctuate a little bit monthly based on new cases that get opened. This is collection rate. They only have to be at 40% in the percentage of current support collected monthly. They steadily are in the 60%, so we shouldn't have any issue with that. Here is what we've performed so far this year. And then payment to arrears, it's 40% goal for this coming MOU. And we're always, by the end of the year, it's a cumulative goal. We usually finish in the upper 60%. We are trending higher this fiscal year than we were last fiscal year. They have left the child welfare issues or child protective services where we screen in our reports within the required timeframes as a performance measure and not a mandated performance measure. That is because there's still a federal audit going on, and the data is not reliable. So we are trying to track our own data. Typically, you see they've drastically improved during last fiscal year in approaching that 95%, but the state will be working with the counties just to make sure that we are trending in the right direction and we don't start backsliding and that we kind of hold our performance, but there is no corrective action against us if we fail to meet those. This is making sure that no more than 40.5% of children who enter foster care in a 12-month period are discharged with permanency within a 12-month period of entering foster care. We've bounced around. The data we don't feel like this data is reliable. The state understands that it's probably not reliable, but it's the best we have to report on. And we are making sure that children who enter foster care in a 12-month period who were discharged within 12 months to reunification, kinship care, guardianship, or adoption, that no more than 8.3% of those re-enter our care within a 12-month period. And we've done very well with that. And then we will ensure that children who enter foster care in a 12-month period in the county, they do not have a rate of placement moves more than 1,000 days of foster care. It won't exceed 4.1%, and we have been lower than that as well. And then last screen here is adoption results. The county's done a great job. It is not part of the MOU, but I wanted to highlight this, that for fiscal year 2020, our baseline was to have 19 adoptions finalized. We had 26 adoptions finalized. And then thus far for this fiscal year, the state has not given us our baseline, but we've already done 8 adoptions since July 1 of 2020. Any questions? I went fast, I'm sorry.
I'll just say that, you don't get to see a lot of what Department of Social Services deals with on a daily basis, weekly basis of meeting criteria that were set to set departments up for failure and by the state. And we signed the last memorandum of understanding under protest. They are starting to adjust some of the figures. They've recognized, I think, that many of them were absolutely unattainable, or they couldn't maintain the databases to be able to give you a reasonable feedback on what you're doing. The bottom line is our entire Department of Social Services is doing an unbelievably good job. I think they're if not the top, in the top 2 or 3% of departments in this state. We are very fortunate that we have the leadership, the caliber of leadership, and the great work that folks are doing. And they have, in the process, gone through, together with our health department, are now authorized substantial equivalence in terms of defining what the job description should look like, and then from that, defining what the requirements are to be hired, which were throwbacks to the 1970s controlled by the state that required stuff that's no longer even applicable. So this is just to show you that they're doing a good job. You don't hear a lot from it. When they don't do a good job, where you have a department that doesn't do a good job, you guys would be getting calls every day, believe me. This staff has done a marvelous job, so tip of the hat to all of them. And they've also pioneered, I think, a way ahead for all of our departments in terms of the ability to have an intentional way of getting feedback from where the rubber meets the road about how to best do their business and how to affect change in a positive way that is, I think, could be used throughout the county. Anyway, no further questions? Consent?
Consent.
Thank you.
Since we're going to be starting in 15 minutes, we've been going for almost 2 hours. Can we can we suspend the pre-agenda meeting, and since we only have 15 minutes for it to be pre-agenda?
Is anyone else scheduled to present anything, or are we just
Yes.
summarizing? You get the gov deals piece.
We do.
Oh, you've got
We
the
have that one,
entire,
and then
well, that was going to be presented anyway,
What we could do
Audit.
is, if it's the board's pleasure, we could go ahead and do the requests from Tax Administration for approval of October 2020 refunds and releases. No commissioners' names on that list.
Consent?
consent.
And the request from the clerk to the board for approval of the minutes from the meeting on October 20th, 2020.
Consent.
Consent.
And then we can save the other 3 items for the 7 o'clock, if that's okay.
All right. Okay, we will recess until the actual agenda kicks off at 7 o'clock.
13 minutes.
Yep. Thank you.